Welcome to a Legendarium special about the strange death of George Washington. In this episode, we will learn about the mysterious final illness which ended the life of the United States' first president and the strange plot a doctor conceived to resurrect George Washington. On December 13, 1799, an apparently healthy George Washington rode around Mount Vernon despite it being a cold and miserable day marred by freezing rain. Determined not to be late for a scheduled family dinner, Washington remained in his wet clothes throughout the feast. That night, Washington awoke his wife, Martha, saying that he struggled to breathe. The former president asked his plantation overseer, Alvin Rollins, to bleed him, in keeping with the then popular medical belief that bleeding reduced fever. A frantic Martha Washington sent the former president's aide, Colonel Tobias Lear, into town to find help. Colonel Lear returned with doctors James Craik and George Rollins, who diagnosed the former president with inflammation of the trachea that blocked his airway. Modern doctors have been unable to determine the first president's final illness. To this day, theories range from diphtheria to pneumonia to streptococcal throat infection. They bled Washington 4 more times over the next 8 hours, with the former president's blood loss totaling 40%. Washington then went through a laundry list of 18th century cures. He gargled with a mixture of molasses, vinegar, and butter, which nearly choked the former president. Washington then inhaled a steam of vinegar and hot water. Then the doctors swabbed his throat with salve and a preparation of dried, crushed beetles. At some point, his doctors tried curing him with an enema, which apparently didn't work. Though they spared no effort, Washington's doctors struggled against an implacable disease using ancient and often unhelpful medicine. Despite, or perhaps because of, their efforts, the former president believed he lay on his deathbed by late afternoon, December 14th. Washington asked to see his will and saw to his final affairs. Josiah Lear reported Washington's last words to be spoken around 10 p.m. on December 14th. The United States' first president said, "I am just going. Have me decently buried, and do not let my body be put into the vault less than 3 days after I am dead. Do you understand me? 'Tis well." Doctor William Thornton, a specialist in tracheostomies, arrived at the president's bedside on December 15th, only to find Washington laid out a stiffened corpse. Thornton, filled with bravado and familiar with cutting-edge medicine, claimed he could use his knowledge of blood transfusions to revive the first president. In the 1620s, Englishman William Harvey discovered the circulation of blood, setting off a wave of experimentation with blood transfusions. Many of these experiments centered on animals rather than humans. In 1656, Christopher Wren made a dog drunk by injecting wine into his bloodstream, showing that blood carried fluids and oxygen throughout the body. On June 15th, 1667, Frenchman Jean-Baptiste Denis began performing blood transfusions on dogs on the banks of the Seine River before gawking crowds. He even gave lamb's blood to a feverish 16-year-old butcher's apprentice who showed his gratitude by butchering the lamb. In November 1667, the Royal Society of London did a transfer on a mentally unstable man named Arthur Cogan using lamb's blood. Later, Cogan claimed that the transfusions turned him into a sheep, so the hope to cure his madness likely failed. Based on the still famous Cogan experiment, Dr. Thornton claimed he could restore the dead Washington to life. He called for cold water to slowly warm the president's body, hot blankets to restore the proper temperature, and restore his cold and hardening blood vessels. Afterwards, Thornton would perform a tracheostomy, a dangerous procedure in the 18th century, though it would be safe on the dead Washington. Dr. Thornton would then use artificial respiration and a lamb's blood transfusion to reanimate the deceased president, hopefully not as a sheep. Martha and the other members of the Washington family squashed the idea quickly. Rather than debate the ethics of Dr. Thornton's proposal, they wanted Washington to be remembered as one who had departed full of honor and renown, free from the frailties of age and full enjoyment of every faculty prepared for eternity. In short, Washington died with his honor intact, so why risk that? A crestfallen Dr. Thornton remained certain that his proposal would have worked, writing 20 years later, "There was no doubt in my mind that his restoration was possible." Strikingly, Dr. Thornton's solution came closer to the truth than he or anyone else at the time likely knew. Today, oxygen, ventilation, and circulation can revive the nearly dead, but only if done immediately. Because Washington's passing happened close to the turn of the 19th century, many saw his death as an evil omen. Mourners assembled at Mount Vernon to attend the service on December 18, 1799. Washington's remains lay in the long portico within a coffin with a silver plate ornament inscribed "Surge ad Judicium," or "Rise to Judgment." The Alexandria Band played funeral dirge by Decker. U.S. Army officers served as pallbearers while the coffin bore Washington's sword and Masonic apron on top. As custom required, Martha closed off the master bedroom and settled into a third-floor bedchamber for a period of mourning. There she read letters of condolence from those closest to her. The United States' second president, John Adams, also wrote her a letter published throughout the United States. It read, "I sympathize with you, with the nation, and with the good men throughout the world in the irreparable loss endured by us all." In Philadelphia, the United States House of Representatives shrouded the Speaker's chair in black. Local businessmen closed their stores in preparation for the young republic's first state funeral held on December 26, 1799, with a national funeral procession beginning at noon and marching through Philadelphia throughout the rest of the day. That wraps things up for this episode of The Legendarium. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, press like. If you want to see more, press subscribe. And if you've got anything to say, let me know in the comments section. Thanks again for joining me, and I hope that you have a great rest of the day.